Welcome to Pods with Posh and Paul, a podcast designed to inspire and challenge listeners through story, experience and insight. To face adversity, learn from suffering and discover how to embrace life with a heart filled with love and gratitude. We are so thrilled to have you journey with us and can't wait to share your stories. Join Sue O'Callaghan and Joanne Webb as we disrupt the theory that everyone has perfect lives.
Hi to all our listeners and thanks so much for tuning in. Today's guest grew up in a small town west of Invercargill on the South Island of New Zealand. Throughout her childhood, she struggled academically, was told she was stupid and good for nothing. She masked the hurt this caused by becoming the class clown, but later on in life it had much bigger effects. It was only as an adult, when she was informally diagnosed with dyslexia, that everything suddenly made sense. Here she is to share her experiences, tell her story in her raw and honest way. Please welcome Stacey Christey.
Hi Stacey, thanks for being with us and thanks for coming on and talking about this really important subject of dyslexia. So, you did not find out you were dyslexic until adulthood, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So when I was a child, I struggled immensely through school. Like as I said to you, I got my books ripped up in front of me. I got made to feel dumb. I then became class clown because I was just like, that's the only way I could mask me feeling stupid was to be the class clown and for the other kids to accept me. So that's how I kind of started and went on from there. Yeah.
It's like, obviously you said, that sounds pretty horrific, having your books ripped up in front of your face and things like that. Is that just because teachers just couldn't cope with the fact that you weren't doing the work? Was that their problem?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I think when I was at school, you kind of get taught in a box and you kind of have to be in that box, and that's how you get taught. See, like with my brain, I get things very, very fast and I'm a very hands-on person, but sometimes it takes me a few times to get it, and then once I've got it, I've got it.
Yeah.
And when I was spelling things backwards, and the teachers just didn't understand that. So they just got frustrated with me, and they couldn't accept the fact that maybe they were teaching me in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
They needed to teach me in a different way for me to learn.
Yeah.
So that's, yeah.
So you're obviously like in mainstream school, the teachers are teaching you your math, your English, your science, or whatever it is, and things are just not sinking in. You're really struggling. How was that making you feel?
Oh, frustrated. Like as a child, like you feel frustrated. You feel like the dumb kid. You feel, because all the other kids are getting it. And like I remember there was, you had to graduate from a pencil to a pen, and I couldn't. Even to this day, I can write neater with a pencil than a pen for some reason. But you had to write, and you had to get all your spelling correct. And so spelling is just not my forte at all. And you had to get all your spelling correct, and you have to write neatly with your pencil before you could graduate. And I couldn't graduate for a pen until I was probably about 9 years old. And so that's how long it took it.
But with that would have brought shame, because everybody else had the pen and you had a pencil.
Definitely. So I was just like, ugh. So I just became the class clown. I became the kid that was destructive, and because I felt these things, and as a child, in the child brain, you just don't understand. You know what you're feeling, but you can't articulate it.
Mm-hmm. So Stacey, we've got all sorts of listeners on here listening to you talking, and so those people that don't know what dyslexia is, or to those people at school that are struggling, or parents that think they might have a dyslexic child, what actually is dyslexia?
So there's a lot of different forms of dyslexia. There's dyspraxia, there's dyslexia, like there's problems with numbers, there's problems with writing, articulate, things like that. And it's very, very complicated because it's different for every person as well. Like 1 in 10 people in New Zealand have dyslexia. The best thing to do is, if you feel like you've got a child struggling, is to go get them tested, because when you get them tested, not that I knew at this point, you can get so much help with it. You can get readers and writers throughout your exams. You can get so much more support these days, and it's absolutely amazing. There's an adult dyslexic group that I've joined and I've spoken in front of in Invercargill, and their goal was to get one of these throughout all New Zealand. In Napier, they've got a school especially for dyslexics. So they with me being dyslexic, it's like a seesaw. So you have to level out to get your words out to articulate, because everything's clear in your head. And that's what people think, dyslexics could be dumb and they got stigma and all this around them. So, but what happens is everything in your head is clear, and it's like a seesaw, and you have to level it out, and you have to bring down your anxieties and all that around it to be able to get your words out, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, to answer your question, it's not one thing. It's just a learning difference.
Yeah. So I've got my eldest son, who's 21. He was formally diagnosed with dyslexia, and he was diagnosed really late at 14. But you can, parents listening, one of the big questions is what age can you get children diagnosed? And actually, I would say if you have any doubts from the age of 5 or 6 when they start to read or write, then to bear it in mind, and don't wait for the school to come up with a diagnosis. Don't wait for the school to contact you to say there's problems with communication, written skills, numbers. Actually, to make your own explorations as a parent if you have any concerns. Did you take yourself off for a diagnosis? Were you formally diagnosed? What happened to you?
So I didn't get diagnosed until actually a couple of years ago, when I was working with Dyslexia in New Zealand, which I had an amazing opportunity with a lady called Chris Cole. She's fantastic, and she's a driving force behind Dyslexia in New Zealand. She's absolutely amazing. And I met her by chance. I was at an art group, and because I do art on Tuesdays, and one of the ladies there said that Chris Cole was her daughter-in-law. And I said, oh wow, like I actually think I'm dyslexic. I'd love to learn more. So I went on, and dyslexia is actually like the school, my children's school, for example. There's a big thing up on dyslexia on the notice board in the staff room, and it says that dyslexia is not passed down the lines and things like that, but actually it is. Like, my father's dyslexic, so therefore I've got a chance. My younger daughter, she's mentally delayed, and we actually believe that this could be dyslexia, some form of dyslexia as well. So it is genetic.
Yes.
There's a lot of testing in the States going on with that at the moment. So even if one of your partner are dyslexic, there is a high chance that your children could be too. So when you first get, like as you said, 5, 6, 7.
Get diagnosed early. Yeah.
Your child's learning different, and like my father was amazing with me growing up. I used to get really frustrated and I couldn't get my words out. I couldn't articulate how I felt. So he used to take me to the garage and put me in front of the boxing bag. Mm-hmm. So I could get it out in some form or another. Yeah. With dyslexic as well, we're very, very hands-on people, so we learn with our hands. Like when I was married to my husband, everything on the farm I had to get in the tractor to learn it. So he would bring me up over the phone, and that's how I learned how to drive a tractor. That's how I learned how to put up brakes. That's how I learned how to do everything. If somebody told me, there's no way I'd get it.
That's exactly right.
I've been hands-on.
It's a different method of learning, isn't it? So, Stacey, I taught at a specialist dyslexia school in England for 8 years.
Oh, wow.
And at parent-teacher meetings, the parents would come in and speak very negatively about dyslexia. Obviously, my child's dyslexic, therefore they can't. There was a lot of can'ts. And I would say to those parents, actually, your child is dyslexic, therefore they can, but they can do it in a very different way. So, for example, dyslexic children and adults have incredible spatial awareness, way beyond the spatial awareness of someone like me who's not dyslexic. There's many gifts and skills and strengths that dyslexic students have at school, and to build on those strengths, not the weaknesses. And I say to parents, you need to now readdress the situation. Yes, they have a different way of learning. So in schools, for example, it's quite difficult to learn from information being put on a whiteboard. Practically, you're talking about, being on the farm, learning practically. So actually, dyslexic students learn practically by actually physically doing things themselves. That's why they make really great engineers in terms of spatial awareness. Lego for boys is amazing in developing that spatial awareness, artwork, creativity. But because the method of learning is very different, it doesn't mean the child has
special needs, it actually means they have different needs from the average child in the way that they learn at school. And I would say, that spatial awareness stood out for me so much at school as to what those students could do compared to other students that weren't dyslexic.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely.
So you grew up on your childhood sounds wonderful. You grew up on a farm. Tell us a bit more about that.
Oh, so I didn't quite grow up as a farm. I grew up in a small town called Wallistown, which I've just actually moved back into. It's a very, very small town just east of Invercargill. So, but my auntie and uncle have big farms, and my grandparents, and we pretty much, we lived right beside a block, and it's got big high trees, so we used to go build trees and all that kind of stuff. It was fantastic. We got Dad, so what I said in the email is I've pretty much got brought up in the bush. So what I mean is my parents weren't dirt poor, they're just dusty, I like to say. And Dad literally had to hunt to put food on the table. So every weekend us kids would go with Dad into the bush and go hunting, go deer stalking and rabbit hunting. We could all skin a rabbit at 3 years old.
That's wonderful.
It was just the way we got brought up. And by doing that, it built us up so much. It gave us respect, it gave us perseverance, it gave us just the real groundings that I believe that everybody should have in their life. And it's an amazing way to live. We got brought up to see the beauty in the most simplistic things. And that's one thing as a life coach that I love to give my clients, is to build them up to see the most beauty in simplistic things, to make them be back to their groundings and to grow from there. It is so important.
And so when you were struggling in school as a child, how did your family cope with that, or how did you have any idea? Was you able to tell your family?
So Mum was, my mother is an amazing woman. She really, really is. I'm very privileged to have such a mother like her. But she, I guess, enabled me in some ways, because she used to do my homework for me. She used to be like, come on, Stace, here, I'll write it down, you copied it, which then kind of hindered me in a way. So at school, I just, Mum and Dad said, well, if school's not for you, work. So I got a job at 11 years old, and I've worked really hard ever since.
Yeah. And don't you think that maybe that's just the time and where you were in New Zealand at the time when you were suffering with dyslexia? Because what are you now? Is it you 32? Is that right? So we don't normally talk about a lady's age on this. I didn't think you'd mind as you're so young. So you're 32. So this is only 20 odd years ago. But actually things have come on in such leaps and bounds since then. I mean, like you say, the facilities in schools nowadays for children with dyslexia or other learning difficulties, it's so great, like the reader writers and extra special needs. So it was just it's an unfortunate, probably just where you were and the time that it happened, isn't it? But then when you say unfortunate, you had the most amazing childhood, but you had to deal with all of that frustration and anger, which is sad. Yeah,
it is. And as a child, you don't understand it. In that child brain, you just don't get it. You don't get it. So then you find other coping mechanisms, like being the class clown, and then it led me down a road of promiscuity and addiction and all that kind of stuff, because I just felt I wasn't worth it. Mm-hmm. And I've always been really good at putting that face. I was that bubbly kid, everyone loved me, I was quite popular because I was so outgoing, and I loved helping people. I'm just, I'm big as life kind of thing, and I've always been like that, so I guess that's one of my strengths. That kind of, but then at the same time it hindered me because I masked a lot.
Yeah. You weren't addressing the core issues of your hurt.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
So you talked to us a little bit about how difficult it is to look a word up in the dictionary, or how hard it is to use Wikipedia. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so when it came to studying, so literally I've got 4 pages open on the computer, 3 to 4 pages open on the computer. So it's what I'm studying, and then it's the words that I don't know. So I literally, because I missed the fundamentals at school, I literally had to go back and figure out what a noun was. Mm-hmm. Like something so stupid, but I just didn't know, because what you don't know, you just don't know. Absolutely. So I had to relearn everything. So I've actually got a book that I've, so studying, I study I've got 3 to 4 pages open. I study what I'm meant to be studying. And then I've got another page open for my words. And then how you need to find words in the dictionary if you don't even know what they start with. And then you look into the thesaurus. I can't even say that word for me. Thesaurus.
Thesaurus.
Did I get it right? Yeah. Because that's what, it kind of explains the words. But then you can't look it up if you don't know. And it's this big, it becomes hard. So my phone, your wee mic that you got on it, it's like, hey Google, and I speak the word into it, and then Bob's your uncle, and it all comes up for me. I'm like, fucking yes.
So I'm just going to say to listeners that, it's quite hard to imagine not being able to recognise what letter a word begins with. But we had some children at school, and we'd say to them, spell your name, and they, for example, say their name was Stephen, they would spell it beginning with a P, and then they would carry on spelling it, but all the letters in a different order. And then we'd say, okay, spell it again, and they'd spell it again, but in a different order again. And then we'd say, spell it again, and it might begin with the N or the S or whatever, any order. And then we'd say, read the words, and they'd say, Stephen, Stephen, Stephen. And we'd say, are any of them different? And they would say no, they couldn't tell the difference. So that's, on a scale of 1 to 10 of dyslexia, that would probably be a 9 or a 10, so quite extreme forms of dyslexia, where it's difficult to recognise a word because the letters all appear jumbled up, don't they?
Oh, definitely. And the thing is, phonics is huge. If you can really push for phonics when your children are younger, they're gonna grow a lot faster as well.
So phonetics is a huge part now in the UK of early childhood education. I'm not so sure in New Zealand what role it has to play, but phonetics is very important, isn't it? Which is the understanding the basic sounds of letters and the combinations of letters in words.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you need it. You definitely need it. Because even I said it percept for such a long time instead of accept. Sometimes my words get jumbled up, so it's just ridiculous. And you get laughed at and stuff, but you grow up and you can learn to laugh back.
And they're actually quite lovely.
Sorry?
They're actually quite lovely, some of those words. My son used to say advocado instead of avocado. And I used to love it. Some of the words, you'd read it as advocado.
Yeah, it's great.
It's lovely, isn't it? What about numbers? Did numbers affect you? Do numbers affect you now?
Oh, definitely. I remember in my first job, we had to write down, I worked in a chicken factory when I was 11 years old, and I had to write down the weights of, how heavy the kebab had to be, and I had to get it perfect. And it took me so long to actually get it in my head.
Yeah.
But once you got it, and you're away.
Yes.
Yeah. But comes timetables, oh my goodness, my 10-year-old daughter's better than timetables in a way. But there's things around it, there is calculators, there's so many things you can use. You can't use it as an excuse.
Yeah. And also, as you've even admitted yourself, you know you're not stupid, and it's just unfortunate you had to grow up through your childhood believing you were, just because you didn't fit into that mainstream, what they wanted, what they needed from you, and you're so not stupid. And I've never met a stupid dyslexic person ever. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, look at Tony Breen.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many famous people out there that have got dyslexia. And it's amazing because with dyslexia, you've got so much, as you said, so you've got so many other abilities that you can use. It's amazing. You pick up on other things and you roll with them and you grow from them. So I'm writing a book at the moment, and it's a bloody challenge, I can tell you. But it's exciting too because I can put all my experiences down and then I can go seek other help.
Absolutely.
You don't need to be afraid of seeking help because you can do so much, and it's only you that can hold you back.
So you're a wonderful example of overcoming. You said, you went through a real struggle in your life, and now obviously you're helping other people, you're writing a book. Can you tell us a bit more about your book?
Yeah, so I'm just going to plug myself for a little bit.
Go ahead, we want to hear.
So throughout my life, I've been very fortunate to have such a colourful past, and I can use this in such an amazing way, and that's why I'm a life coach today, because I've been through so much. And in my book, it's basically all the people, good and bad, that have influenced me throughout my life, and then seeing that as in the adult brain and looking back and telling yourself a different story. Because we get stuck Like if something bad happens to us as a child, we get stuck and we always tell each other, ourselves the same story over and over and over again. And it's not until you actually see all the facts. Like I say to my clients is I always get them to try to not to live in an illusional world, which means that there's a thing called emotional event. So say if you were walking down the street and you waved to somebody and they completely just did not see you or ignored you, you then to start, your first thought might be like, what's your problem? And then you get tense in your body, and then the emotion you feel would be anger or confusion or rejection. And then and the action could be that you go and have a bitch to your friends about it. I don't know what her problem was, or, but what could have happened was that lady's grandmother could have just passed away. And she was so focused on that. So therefore, out of one event, you make up this big illusion, and the action from it can destroy or so it kind of comes back to that, as from an adult looking back now, the facts, all the facts that are around that situation, so you can tell yourself a different story.
Well, that as a life coach, unfortunately, still lots of adults will continue to tell themselves the same story, and hence why we are all in the same line of work. We're trying to say to people, sometimes our brains go into this overactive state and we get into a frenzy over something perfectly innocent.
And it's how it processes it through the frontal lobe. Like it's, but to see it what it is and to tell yourself a different story as an adult, I think only from that moment then is you can grow.
Amazing.
Like I'm not stupid. I know I'm not stupid. I can do, my IQ is amazing. Everything in my brain is so clear. Like I get things very, very fast. My brain goes from 0 to 10 in 2 seconds. It's already worked it out. Yeah. So that's a strength for me as being dyslexic. I'm very hands-on. I get proactive into my emotion. So that's another thing, is that I can actually ground myself because of that as well.
Yes.
So that's a strength.
So you've rewritten your stories, because your stories were one thing as a child and growing up and a teenager and all, and the angst that you went through, but now as an adult you've rewritten them stories.
Exactly, and that's what my book's about, is that regardless of the people in your life, good and bad, it's up to you to be mentally strong. And if you're not there, seek help to get there.
Yes.
And then help others, because I believe as a person, this is just my philosophy, as a person you can get so far by yourself, and then you get the next level when you seek help, and then you get to give back to other people, that is when you've got it.
Absolutely. And also when you're giving back to people, when you are helping people in therapy, your therapy is so much more intense for yourself, isn't it? Because we are forever learning, forever growing, and we learn just as much from our clients as they learn from us.
Oh, definitely. And it's allowing yourself and giving yourself permission to be open to that as well.
Yeah.
So basically that's what my book's about. And it just gives a whole lot of tools to move forward and to move past it. And I've never been so fucking vulnerable in my life writing this book. Sorry, I swear.
That's okay. And so can I just ask, how are you writing the book? Are you writing it like on the computer, or are you doing it verbally and the computer's translating your words?
So my best friend is an absolute bloody gem. She is amazing. So I write chapters at a time and I send them to her. And Mary Ellen and I have been best friends since we're 3 years old.
Cute.
And she knows me, she knows my language, she knows my linguistics, so she can articulate what I want to say and then flip it around. And she's just amazing. So she's kind of like my ghostwriter.
Nice.
That's something that's so lovely. It's a great tool to have. I say to a lot of my teenagers when they're struggling with dyslexia at the age that, teenage years are really hard, aren't they? When they're struggling hormonally, they're struggling in relationships, they're struggling to find their identity, to actually have dyslexia put onto you is a huge added burden for most people. And I say to a lot of them, write your story, write down your feelings. It's a really good tool. I mean, in the old days, we used to have a diary, didn't we? But nowadays, you can write online. You can actually write your book. And I say, talk about your feelings. Talk about how hard it is. Write it down and write chapters. Write, 6 months ago, this is what I felt. Or today, this is what I'm feeling. Or what it's like at school, what it's like at home. Because you can publish it into a book. It's so easy now to put it onto different apps. And to write it even in Grammarly. Grammarly is an amazing app to write in, where it's actually correcting your sentences, it's reorganizing things for you. But I think writing is wonderful.
Yeah.
Oh, Grammarly is extraordinary. Do you not know Grammarly? Grammarly is amazing.
No, see that?
That might save Mary Ellen a job. Is that name?
Now I say it to my students, download Grammarly. I think you pay yearly for it. There's different levels you can pay. But if you write it in it, it comes up with red, which is the spelling mistakes. It comes up with blue, which is the grammar, and then it has highlights areas. It says suggest writing it around in a different way. And I just say to my students, use all these amazing apps. And that was going to be one of my questions actually. Have you found some apps online other than Grammarly that you found really useful to use with dyslexia?
No. See, I'm quite lazy.
No.
I'm quite lazy when it comes to technology, and I find for myself that if I do things the hard way, I actually learn more.
Good for you.
But everyone is different. Like that Grammarly, obviously, that's I'm just going to take that and going to roll with it because it's going to help me a lot. But it's finding these out, and there's so like Dyslexic New Zealand. You can go onto the website, and they give you so much.
Wonderful. And do you find there's good support groups there for people that are struggling on their own or feel isolated in dyslexia to connect with others? Have you found any?
Yeah, definitely. Like, there's a big support group. That's what I was saying before. Like, Dyslexic New Zealand want to have a support group throughout the whole New Zealand, and they feel that it's really, really important. So, I think it's the first Monday of every month, everybody gets together, and it's the fact that they don't feel alone, and they can express their emotions and express how they feel, and just the fact that they're not alone and they're not feeling isolated. And there's an adult group which I'm a part of, and there's parent groups to support their children, and so on.
How do you think you would have felt as a child? Like, obviously Sue was just saying then about teenage years are really hard, then to add an extra label onto you being dyslexic. I mean, there's pros and cons, isn't there? How do you think your childhood would have been different if you'd been diagnosed?
I would have been a brain surgeon. I would have been, no, seriously, I would have been a doctor or a brain surgeon because I love that work. And I would have focused at school. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't have had a chance to work school and to be in the crowds that I went to.
Yeah.
I would have been, it would have been completely different to me. But within saying that, I am still grateful that I went through that because I wouldn't be the person I am today.
Of course.
And I wouldn't be helping people I am today if I didn't go through that.
But I think you'd agree the label of dyslexia, it's not like, we're forever trying to put labels on people, ADHD, ADD, whatever. But I think children, in my experience anyway, I've dealt with a few children who have found out later on, like Sue's son, if they're 14, that they've got dyslexia. They've actually just had a huge sigh of relief. It's like this massive weight has been taken off their shoulders because they're no longer stupid. They can do stuff. They just have to be taught in a different way. And to me, it's like, it's been such a good label for them to have.
I have to say, I totally agree with that, because when my son was diagnosed, rather than feeling disappointed, he was hugely relieved because he had spent years thinking there was something really wrong with him. And when it was explained to him by the psychologist, he actually could compartmentalise all the different aspects of his writing, his reading, his learning, and it really helped him. And emotionally, I think also it was really good because he could actually move on now. He could get the support at school that was needed practically, which was, as you've mentioned earlier, exam support, extra time, reader-writer assistance and so on. And actually he could have his device at times when others couldn't have their devices. But I think emotionally then that really helped him move on and just accept where he was at and deal with his learning in a different way.
That's right.
And don't you find, like, when you do go through those tests, because you do have to go through like a registered psychologist to get the proper tests done, don't you? I mean, no, you can have some done in school and some informally, but if you're going to pay several $1,000s out, you go via a psychologist. But they don't just tell you what's wrong with you, they also highlight where you're amazing as well. Like, they'll go, but this part of your brain's working super fast, so this is why you're processing XYZ so quick, but it's just this little pathway might not be working. They really go into it, don't they, and explain it to you. So actually you come out, yes, you're labelled with dyslexia, but you've also just been told where you're amazing as well.
Oh, definitely. Like, I did the IQ test when I was getting with Sue, and I didn't realise, because I always just deemed myself as dumb. and just, you know, different and all that kind of stuff that goes with it. And when she did the IQ test with me, my IQ was just, it's sort of above, it was huge. And then she kind of went on to people that I knew, like famous, like Tony Brown and stuff like that, and it was equal to his. And I was like, yes! Millionaire, here I come!
So did your head swell a little bit? And you're like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, thanks. But there's so many different tools. Like I've got quite a lot of dyslexic clients that come see me as well, because I promote myself as being dyslexic. So like they struggle. You know how I was saying with the seesaw before, that you have to bring down your anxiety and all that kind of stuff to articulate how you feel, because it's just everything. It's chaotic in there. It's absolutely chaotic. And I've got clients. So what I do is I get them to stand on one leg and I throw a ball. Mm-hmm. So when they're throwing the ball and standing on one leg, they're concentrating on something else, and then their emotions just come.
Oh, nice technique.
We used to say to the students at school that they were, the problem with dyslexia is that they were highly intelligent, and when the teacher at school presented a topic or gave some information, what would happen in the head of a dyslexic student was that so much information would come to them. And it would be like waiting at the traffic lights. So across the roads and there's traffic lights there. And normally the traffic lights would go red and the green ones would go through and the red ones would wait. But actually in the mind and the head of a dyslexic student, all the information would be trying to rush through all the different traffic lights, and it would get clogged so nothing could get through. And so when the teacher had moved on to the next thing, the dyslexic student was still in thoughts that were maybe 50, 60 different thoughts going on, and all the other students in the class had moved on, whether it was geography about a volcano or something. This student was still stuck in so much information coming in. So it's not lack of intelligence, it's actually most students that are dyslexic have very high IQs. Mm-hmm.
That's right. That is so right. Like I've got people that come to me and they say business idea, and I'm just like you know, from one extreme to the next, and I'm like, I see the potential in everything.
Yes.
That's how your brain works. You go from 1 to 10 and then you go backwards. And then you work it out.
Yeah, and most of my previous dyslexic students, and we're talking quite a few years ago, that I'm in contact with now on Facebook, are all entrepreneurs. They've done extraordinary things with their life. A lot haven't gone down the traditional route of school and university and established careers. They've actually been ideas people. They've created their own business, and they can multitask as well and do many things at one time, and have been extraordinary entrepreneurs and set up amazing businesses and been very successful, actually, and lead very happy lives.
Yeah, like I started a wedding dress business. I was like, well, you know, my husband pushed me at the time, and I said, well, it works. I couldn't work as I had very young children, and it just wasn't a thing. And he was busy on the farm, and I was just doing housewife, but I was getting bored because I always have to have a project in mind. I always have to have something done, because that's just who I am. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, when I got married, I found it really hard to get a wedding dress and source these things. So I started my own wedding dress business, and I sold it for 100 times profit, and I was away sailing. A few years later, when I had another child, and a friend came to me and that she wanted to go partnership, and I said, well, we worked it all out and it wasn't going to work, so I sold it to her. And then I got bored again, so then I was just like, now what am I going to do? Mm-hmm. So I was like, well, I found it hard studying. At that time, I wasn't diagnosed as dyslexic at that time, but I knew, and I still had the stigmatization about how I was dumb and couldn't study and da-da-da. So I was like, what can I do? How can I help people? How can I put the best of me in this world? And that's when I become a life coach. Mm-hmm. And every year I further my study, every year I grow my business, and it's exciting. There's so much you can do.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing. We've all got amazing unlimited potential, haven't we? It's just tapping into that.
That's right. That is right. Yeah.
So just what would you say to any parent who thinks their child might have dyslexia?
First of all, go to get them tested.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I do say to my parents with children with dyslexia is to look up the 5 love languages, for example.
I love that.
Yeah, 5 love languages. Get to know your child, and so they can express to you how they feel in different ways.
Yeah, and also, you know, parents probably need to change their expectations a little bit, don't they? Because parents, we've all been given these milestones from when we have a baby. You know, your baby should be eating this at that stage, walking at this stage, learning to read at that stage. Actually, we're all beautiful and we're all unique and we're all individual. So if they change their expectations and just let the child flourish, they're probably going to come on further and quicker without those added pressures, aren't they?
Oh, Joe, that's a beautiful way to put it. Definitely. You shouldn't have expectations on your children. See them as they are, let them grow as they want, and find. And, you know, it is our ways, it's our responsibility as parents to find different ways to help them grow.
Totally.
And Stacey,
so much.
what would you say to listeners, whether it be a child, a teenager, or an adult struggling in dyslexia right now, feeling as though they're not going to find their way in the world or make anything themselves? What tip or what would you like to say?
Get proactive in your emotion. First, feel it. Allow yourself to feel it. Give yourself permission to feel it. And then it's your responsibility to get help and to source it, to go get it. Don't stop. Get proactive in your emotion and don't stop. Don't give up.
And I should say, but like here in New Zealand, we've got really good, I should say, organisations for dyslexia, and around the world, you know, there's, and with the way the world is now online, you can go on to a support group, or you can go on and even do dyslexia tests online, can't you? You know, I mean, I know they're not 100% accurate, but they do give you some indication. So there's lots and lots of resources out there, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I think it's very vital as a person with dyslexia or not, is to really focus on your gifts, learn what they are, focus on them and grow from that.
Yeah, that's
Don't let it hinder you. It's exciting. Like, I'm proud to be dyslexic.
Yeah.
Stacey, you're an absolute inspiration. Thank you so much for the journey that you've walked. Thank you for coming on board and sharing with us today all the information and advice you'd give to listeners. Jo, is there anything else you'd like to say?
No, I just think you're amazing, honey, and I think you're a vibrant being in the world, and we need more people like you. So your personality shines. Is there any one last line you'd like to leave with our listeners?
Not fake it till you make it, fake it till you are it.
Oh man, I like that.
Love it, love it.
That's great.
You're an absolute treasure, and thank you for your raw, honest account of everything. You're a treasure.
Thanks, Stacey. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's been amazing.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for being with us today. For us to inspire others to live their magnificently imperfect life, please subscribe and leave us a 5-star review on iTunes or on your podcast app. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Pods with Posh and Pool. We can't wait for you to join us on our next episode. Love, light and peace.